Today what I'm going to go over is how to properly jump start a vehicle using jumper cables or booster cables. Here we have a vehicle with a dead battery and a vehicle that has a good battery and a charging system. What we'll do is we'll check the volts on the battery, get an idea on how dead it is, and then I will show you how to jump start the vehicle using a pair of jumper booster cables. In this vehicle you have two terminals, a red and a black. The red indicating the positive side, the black indicating the ground or negative side. The battery is conveniently hidden in the fender, so if you had to replace this battery, you would have to remove the tire, remove the inner fender panel, and replace this battery. But here is where we will use our jumper cables. Now, I will follow the standard procedures for a vehicle that has a battery exposed and you're connecting the jumper cables to the battery and ground, even though this battery is concealed. Here we'll be using a digital multimeter. We're going to change the digital multimeter, so we are using the volts direct current. The range will automatically go to 40 volts. Usually in manual ranging mode it's a little more accurate. This does have an auto range, but in this case we're going to be hold it on the manual range, 40 volts. Removing the protective cap from the positive post or positive auxiliary post and placing my red lead to the positive auxiliary post and the black lead to ground, I get 11.33 volts, which in this case is not really enough to start the vehicle. You want to get your jumper cables. These were homemade. And of course the jumper cables will have black and red leads on them, indicating where you would put them on the battery. Red going to the positive and black going to the negative or ground. These are homemade out of welding cable, so I can get a little bit more amperage to the vehicle that I want to start, so I get some more current flow. Okay, a couple things that I'll point out here as we're hooking the jumper cables up is you got to make sure you identify your posts on your battery. Here we have a positive. Over here we have NEG for negative. It could be a plus sign and a minus sign. And then something else I would like to point out is that the positive post is generally larger in diameter than the negative post. Even though that was supposed to kind of be a semi-preventative from hooking the battery up backwards, that doesn't stop people from spreading open their terminals and making them fit. But the positive post is generally larger in diameter than the negative post. Something to note. So we're going to start off by hooking up our positive cable first to the good vehicle. Then next we want to hook the positive post to our positive cable of the bad vehicle, or the vehicle with the dead battery. So we'll hook our other red clamp to the positive post of the vehicle with the dead battery. Next, we're going to hook up our black cable to the negative of our good battery. I've got a ground right on the alternator. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to connect our black jumper cable to the ground of the vehicle. Now, why we connect it to the ground instead of the negative of the battery cable, you ask? Well, there's two reasons. If you have an exposed battery, you want any sparks to occur when you hook up that jumper cable as far away from that battery as possible, because the battery emits hydrogen, which is an explosive gas, and it may cause the battery to explode. The second reason is, by hooking it to the ground, we are sending current directly through our jumper cables to the starter, a direct path to the starter. Instead of going through that small cable that goes from the fender to the starter, we'll allow some of the current from the battery to go through there, and some of the current from the battery on the vehicle with the good battery to go through the ground to the starter. So the starter is getting current through two paths. Once you have your jumper cables hooked up, you can start the vehicle that has the good battery and let it run for about 5 minutes to give the car with the dead battery an initial charge. This will help the vehicle crank over easier, and you'll find out that you'll have difficulties originally trying to get it to jump start right away, because the jumper cables they sell in the stores do not have a very large gauge. So to give you an easier jump start the engine in the vehicle that has the good battery and let it run for about 5 minutes. Once you have ran the vehicle for about 5 minutes to give an initial charge to the battery, you can now start the vehicle with the dead battery. Once you've started this vehicle and got it running, the vehicle with the dead battery, let it run for a little bit. Don't immediately disconnect the jumper cables. There are some older vehicles that if you disconnect the battery or disconnect the jumper cables with the vehicle that has the dead battery, the charging system may burn itself out trying to charge a battery, especially if the battery may be incorrect. It's a larger capacity. So you may want to leave the jumper cables hooked up for a little while until you're sure that the battery has a decent charge and the charging system on this vehicle or the vehicle with the dead battery does not burn out trying to charge this battery. Now that we've got the vehicle jump started, we'll start by first disconnecting the ground cable on the vehicle with the dead battery. That way, again, if there are any sparks, they occur farthest away from the battery and there won't be any chance of a battery explosion. Next, remove the negative battery cable or booster cable, jumper cable, from the negative battery of the good vehicle. Now we can remove the positive jumper cable from the battery with the good vehicle. And finally, we can remove the positive jumper cable from the positive terminal of the vehicle with the dead battery. With the vehicle running, we'll want to turn on our voltmeter again to DC volts. Make sure that our range is correct. Again, this particular Fluke digital multimeter, when put on DC volts, will be at a manual range of 40 volts because this particular meter is used in the automotive industry. Or the positive lead on the digital multimeter goes on the positive post of the battery, or in this case, our positive auxiliary post, and this one goes on our negative. A properly charging battery should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 13.8 to 14.2. Some of your higher capacity charging systems will put out up to 14.8. So as we see here, this charging system on the vehicle with the dead battery is charging at around 14.2. We have successfully jump-started a vehicle with a dead battery safely. Always remember safety. If you are in a particular situation where you have to jump-start a vehicle out on the road, make sure that, again, you've placed your vehicles in park with the parking brake, and on the vehicle with the good battery, make sure to turn on your hazard lights, so that way people coming both directions see that you are in an emergency situation. Thank you for watching.